Imagine that. Not evil, not hatred, not cruelty, but stupidity. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian and philosopher who resisted the Nazi regime, wrote these words while sitting in a prison cell. He wasn't speaking as an academic or from the safety of a library. He was watching a society collapse into darkness, asking himself, how did so many ordinary, intelligent people allow this to happen? This is where he arrived at a terrifying conclusion. Stupidity, not wickedness, might be the deadliest force in human history. Now let's pause here. When you hear the word stupidity, you might imagine someone who simply lacks intelligence, someone uneducated, someone clueless. But that's not what Bonhoeffer meant. For him, stupidity is not a matter of IQ or knowledge. It's not that people don't know the facts. It's that they refuse to think. They surrender their judgment. They stop asking questions. In Bonhoeffer's eyes, stupidity is a moral and social condition. It spreads like a virus. It takes over groups of people, entire nations, especially in times of fear, crisis, or mass manipulation. And here's the frightening part. Stupidity can make a clever person act more dangerously than a malicious one. Why? Because a malicious person still knows what they are doing is wrong. There's guilt, there's strategy, there's at least some awareness. But a stupid person feels no guilt. They can cause enormous damage, and all the while they remain convinced they are in the right. Think about it. You can argue with a malicious person. You can expose them. Sometimes you can stop them. But try reasoning with stupidity. It's like shouting into the wind. No fact, no evidence, no logical explanation can break through. Bonhoeffer writes that when you confront stupidity with facts, the person simply rejects them. They'll dismiss contradictions as irrelevant. They'll double down, holding to their belief even tighter. And if you push too hard, you risk provoking aggression. In other words, the more you try to reason with stupidity, the more dangerous it becomes. Now, why is this so terrifying? Because stupidity allows evil to thrive. Wicked leaders rise to power not just because they are cunning or cruel, but because millions of people hand them power willingly. They chant slogans, they share propaganda, they repeat lies without thinking, and in doing so, they become complicit in the destruction of truth. Bonhoeffer saw this firsthand in Nazi Germany. His own country, home to philosophers, poets, scientists, and thinkers, became a breeding ground for unthinking obedience. How? Fear? Pressure? Propaganda. People stopped thinking independently and instead followed the herd. And here's the point that shakes us. Stupidity is not an intellectual defect. It is a moral failure. Even intelligent people can fall into it when they give up their responsibility to think critically. Let me give you an image. Imagine someone holding a shield, blocking out every inconvenient fact. That shield is built from slogans, catchphrases, group identity, political loyalty. As long as they hold it, no truth can reach them. That is stupidity in Bonhoeffer's sense. Now, the natural question is, what do we do about it? If you can't argue stupidity away, how do you fight it? Bonhoeffer offers a sobering answer. He says, never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reasons, for it is senseless and dangerous. Instead, stupidity can only be overcome through liberation. But what does that mean? Liberation. Bonhoeffer believed that stupidity often arises under oppression, when people lose their freedom to think or feel powerless. They retreat into slogans because it feels safe. To cure it, you can't just throw facts at them. You need to create space for freedom. Freedom to think, to question, to rediscover responsibility. In other words, people have to choose to think again. They can't be forced into it. That's why Bonhoeffer called stupidity not just an individual weakness, but a social disease. It thrives in groups where peer pressure and conformity silence independent thought. And it shrinks when people are isolated, when they're forced to wrestle with truth on their own. So, why does this matter today? Because Bonhoeffer wasn't only describing Germany in the 1940s, he was describing something timeless. Look around. Misinformation spreads faster than truth. Conspiracy theories thrive. Social media rewards outrage over reflection. And in politics, too often, it's not reason that wins, it's slogans. Bonhoeffer's warning hits us like a cold wind. The danger is not just bad people, it's people who stop thinking. So here's the challenge. When we ask, how could such terrible things happen in history? How could entire populations accept lies, cruelty, even genocide? The answer is not always that people were evil. It's that they were stupid in Bonhoeffer's sense. They gave up their responsibility to think, and evil rushed in to fill the vacuum. And here's the unsettling truth. Stupidity is contagious. It spreads when people feel powerless. It spreads when leaders demand blind loyalty. It spreads when questioning becomes dangerous, when fear silences thought. Bonhoeffer's prison reflections were not just abstract philosophy. They were a desperate attempt to make sense of his world, a world where neighbours betrayed neighbours, where truth was buried under propaganda, where educated men defended barbarism, and his conclusion was haunting. Our greatest threat is not malice, but stupidity. But remember, Bonhoeffer was not writing to crush hope. He believed liberation was possible. He believed stupidity could be resisted. And he believed it began with each individual choosing courage. Courage to think, courage to question, courage to resist conformity. This brings us to the heart of his theory. Stupidity is not just about others, it is a danger within ourselves. Each of us faces the temptation to surrender our thinking, to take the easy path of slogans instead of the hard path of truth. Bonhoeffer calls us to vigilance, to self-examination, to the lifelong duty of independent thought. And that perhaps is the most terrifying and most empowering part of his message. Stupidity, in Bonhoeffer's sense, is not simply a weakness of the mind. It is a surrender of responsibility. It is the choice to give up thinking critically and independently. When people stop asking hard questions and instead hide behind ready-made slogans, catchphrases, or the opinions of their group, they become blind to reality. This blindness is not innocent, it is dangerous. Because while ignorance can be corrected with information, stupidity resists correction. It does not want to see, it does not want to hear, and it does not want to be challenged. That is why Bonhoeffer called it more dangerous than malice. A malicious person still knows they are doing wrong. Their actions are deliberate, and sometimes you can stop them by exposing them. But stupidity arms itself with a false sense of righteousness. The stupid person commits harm without hesitation, convinced that they are right, that they are serving a higher cause, or that they are merely obeying orders. This is why entire nations can slide into barbarism, not because their citizens are overflowing with hatred, but because they stop thinking. They conform, they obey, they become instruments of destruction without ever questioning how or why. Bonhoeffer saw this in Germany under the Nazis. Educated men, respected professionals, and ordinary neighbours became unthinking participants in cruelty. They allowed lies to replace truth, and they silenced the voice inside them that might have protested. What terrified Bonhoeffer most was not the existence of evil leaders, but the readiness of so many people to follow them. Evil by itself does not have enough power to rule. It relies on stupidity to clear the way. It needs millions of hands willing to carry out orders, millions of mouths willing to repeat slogans, and millions of minds willing to stop thinking. This is what makes stupidity such a social disease. It spreads more easily in groups than in individuals. In a crowd, people lose their independence. They echo what everyone else is saying, they fear standing out, and they mistake conformity for safety. In solitude, however, people sometimes rediscover their clarity. Bonhoeffer noted that isolation forces people to wrestle with truth directly, without the shield of collective slogans. But in the mass gatherings of society, whether through propaganda, political rallies, or in today's terms, the endless noise of digital media, stupidity multiplies. The frightening reality is that this is not a relic of history. It is with us now. Consider how misinformation spreads online. A false claim can reach millions within hours, repeated not because people have thought it through, but because it feels good to believe. Consider political polarization. Many align themselves with a party or ideology so strongly that they reject any evidence that contradicts their side. Or look at how anger, outrage, and simple narratives dominate social media while patience, nuance, and reflection are drowned out. None of this is about intelligence. Brilliant people can and often do become part of the stupidity Bonhoeffer described. The issue is not IQ, it is the willingness to think responsibly. So the question becomes, can stupidity be defeated? Bonhoeffer's answer is sobering. He believed it cannot be argued away. Facts bounce off it like stones against armor. Arguments only make it more defensive, more aggressive. Instead, he insisted stupidity must be overcome through liberation. People need to be freed from the conditions that make them passive: oppression, fear, blind loyalty, the pressure to conform. When they feel powerless, they retreat into slogans. But when they rediscover freedom, they have the chance to think again. And with freedom must come courage. Because thinking independently is not easy. It means being willing to stand apart from the group. It means risking criticism, rejection, or even punishment. Without courage, people choose the comfort of stupidity. With courage, they can reclaim their responsibility to think. This is where Bonhoeffer's theory cuts deepest. It is not simply about other people or about some abstract society. It is about us. Each of us faces the temptation to stop thinking. Each of us is drawn to the safety of belonging, the ease of slogans, the comfort of certainty, and stupidity always offers an easier path. But if we accept it, if we let others do our thinking for us, we contribute to the very danger Bonhoeffer warned against. That is why he places the responsibility squarely on the individual. The battle against stupidity begins with self-examination. Am I thinking critically, or am I simply echoing what I've been told? Am I seeking truth, or just protecting my comfort? Am I willing to stand for what is right, even if it costs me? Bonhoeffer's own life shows what this courage looks like. When most pastors in Germany surrendered the church to Hitler's control, he refused. He spoke truth when truth was forbidden. He resisted when resistance was dangerous. He was silenced, banned, imprisoned, and eventually killed. Yet his writings survive not as the words of a distant philosopher, but as the testimony of a man who lived and died by the principle that thinking, questioning, and resisting are moral duties. He showed that stupidity can be resisted, but only with great cost. The lesson is clear. Stupidity thrives when people care more about belonging than truth, more about comfort than courage. It spreads when people surrender their responsibility to think, but it can be broken when individuals reclaim that responsibility. Each time someone pauses before repeating a slogan, each time someone questions instead of blindly agreeing, each time someone chooses truth over convenience, the grip of stupidity weakens. These small acts of courage matter. Bonhoeffer's warning is terrifying, but it is also empowering. If stupidity is the greater enemy, then vigilance, courage, and independent thought are our greatest weapons. Evil cannot succeed without stupidity. Lies cannot dominate if enough people keep questioning. Tyranny cannot flourish if enough people refuse to obey blindly. That is the hope hidden inside Bonhoeffer's grim insight. Stupidity is powerful, but it is not invincible. It can be resisted, it can be overcome, and the fight begins, not with others, but with ourselves. Stupidity, Bonhoeffer wrote, is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. His words are not just a description of the past, they are a warning for every generation. If we do not guard our responsibility to think, we risk becoming instruments of destruction without even realizing it. But if we choose courage over comfort, responsibility over passivity, and truth over slogans, then stupidity does not win. And in that choice lies the fate of our societies, our communities, and our own humanity.